Tom Harlan had lived alone for so long that even he sometimes forgot how many years had passed. People in town would say it had been 9 years, maybe a little more. Ever since his parents were gone, and the ranch slowly became quieter and quieter. But Tom did not count the days. They all felt the same. Morning started with the same cold wind brushing through the open fields, and evening ended with the same silent house where no lamp was lit unless he needed it. A man could get used to anything. Even a life with no voices, no laughter, and no reason to hurry. His ranch sat far from the nearest town, placed between long stretches of empty grassland and a small river that froze almost every winter. Once, long ago, the place had been lively. His father owned more horses, and his mother always kept visitors fed with warm bread and stew. But those memories belonged to a time that felt like it wasn't his anymore. Now, there were only 2 old horses left, both too calm and too slow to act wild. And Tom cared for them as if they were the last living connection to who he used to be. Each morning, he walked out with a quiet routine. He would fix fences, sweep the barn, and check the small vegetable garden he tried to keep alive. The work wasn't exciting, but it gave him something to do. When a board was broken, he mended it. When a gate was loose, he tightened it. When something was empty, he refilled it. There was no one to hurry him, and no one expecting anything from him. And maybe that was why he remained there. Life hurt less when no one was around to leave. Tom didn't dislike people. He simply didn't know how to be around them anymore. When he did go to town, he only bought what he needed: salt, flour, sometimes rope or nails. He nodded at the shopkeeper, thanked him politely, and left before anyone tried to start a conversation. Folks were friendly, but Tom always felt like he had forgotten how to talk like he used to. The winter that year came early and stronger than expected. Cold winds rolled down from the hills, carrying sheets of frost that covered his windows before he woke. He spent more time chopping firewood, preparing for nights that seemed longer than they should be. The silence grew deeper with the snow so deep that even small sounds like the crackle of burning wood felt louder. On one of those evenings, Tom stood outside splitting a final stack of firewood. The sky was turning dark blue, the wind cutting through his coat, and small flakes of snow drifted down like ash from a slow-burning fire. He was thinking about going inside when he heard something strange, a sound he hadn't heard at his ranch in many years. It was faint, soft, and almost unbelievable. It was a knock. Tom froze where he stood. At first, he thought it must be the wind hitting the door, but the sound came again, slow, weak, almost like someone too tired to knock properly. He set the axe down and walked toward the cabin door, confused and alert. No one came out this far unless they got lost or needed help, and most travelers avoided this route during winter storms. When he reached the door and pulled it open, the cold wind rushed in, and he saw her. A tall Comanche woman stood outside, wrapped in a thin blanket that was barely keeping out the cold. Snow clung to her braids and shoulders. Her face was pale from the freezing air, and her lips trembled as she tried to speak. Her eyes, though tired, showed a strength that had not yet faded. Tom stared at her for a moment, unsure if what he saw was real. She looked exhausted, like she had been walking far longer than anyone should in such weather. Her breath came out in short, shaky clouds. "Please," she whispered. The word almost carried away by the wind. Warmth. Just warmth. She was shivering badly, and Tom didn't waste a second more. He stepped aside and motioned her in. "Come in. Quickly now. You're freezing." She stepped inside with slow, heavy movements, as if her legs barely obeyed her anymore. Tom shut the door behind her and hurried to the fireplace, adding more wood to the flames. The fire brightened the room, and the warmth finally began to push back the cold that clung to her clothes. The woman knelt near the fire, holding her hands close to it. Even then, Her fingers still shook. Tom fetched a dry blanket, setting it around her shoulders gently. She looked up at him with tired gratitude, her eyes soft but filled with strain. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice rough but sincere. Tom nodded, feeling an old, unfamiliar nervousness inside him. He could handle storms. He could handle loneliness. But handling another person was something he had forgotten how to do. "What happened?" he asked quietly, keeping his tone gentle so he wouldn't startle her. She took a long moment to gather enough breath to speak. "Storm hit while we were trying to cross the ridge. Others moved ahead. I fell behind. The snow. It came fast." She paused to warm her hands again. "I walked until I saw a faint light. It was your cabin." Tom listened carefully. Her voice carried both calmness and fatigue, like she was trying to stay strong even while her body fought the cold. "Have you eaten anything?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not since yesterday." Tom immediately prepared food, simple, warm stew he had made earlier. He set a bowl beside her, and she accepted it with both hands, still covered in the blanket. She ate slowly, trying not to rush, despite her hunger. He sat across the room, watching her with quiet concern. He didn't want to crowd her or make her feel unsafe. She seemed proud, steady, and used to hardship. But even the strongest person could be beaten down by winter storms. She finished her food and looked at him with calm, steady eyes. My name is Ayanna," she said softly. Tom hesitated, then replied, "I'm Tom. Tom. Harlan." She nodded, as if memorizing it. Warmth slowly returned to her cheeks, and the shivering eased. But outside, the snow began falling harder, and the wind grew louder. Tom knew then that she wouldn't be able to leave that night. The storm was too dangerous, and she looked too weak to walk even a short distance. "You'll stay here tonight," he said quietly, not as a question, but as a simple truth. She looked at the fire, then at him, and nodded without protest. "I am grateful, Tom Harlan." He felt something in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, the cabin glowed with warm firelight. Ayanna wrapped herself in the blanket and rested near the hearth, her breathing calm and slow. Tom sat at the table for a long time, watching the fire instead of sleeping. His cabin, once silent for 9 long years, now held the quiet sound of another heartbeat. It was strange. It was unexpected. But it didn't feel wrong. For the first time in many years, Tom did not feel completely alone. The storm only grew stronger through the night. The wind pushed against the cabin walls like a large hand trying to shake them loose. And snow piled up so quickly that the windows turned white. Tom sat awake for a long time, listening to the storm and checking the fire whenever it started to fade. He wasn't used to watching over someone, but every few minutes he found himself glancing toward Ayanna to make sure she was breathing comfortably. She slept lightly, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. Her face looked peaceful now. That warmth had returned to her skin. The exhaustion that had softened her features earlier was slowly lifting. When morning finally came, the storm had not ended. The snow outside lay thick and tall, covering the path and the fence lines completely. Tom stepped outside for a moment, letting the door open just enough for him to inspect the world outside. The cold air hit him like a slap, sharp and heavy. Snow reached halfway up his boots the moment he stepped down, and he knew instantly that no one was going anywhere that day, not even the old horses wanted to step out of the barn. He went back inside quickly, shutting the cold out. Ayanna stirred when she heard the door close. Her eyes opened slowly, and she looked around the cabin, taking in the warmth and the safety of the place. "Good morning," she said softly. Tom nodded. "Morning. The storm's still going." Ayanna didn't seem surprised. "I expected that. The wind last night felt strong enough to sweep away a whole herd." Tom gave a small smile. It was rare for him, but something about her calmness made him less guarded. "You rested well?" "Better than I have in many nights," she replied. She sat up slowly, adjusting the blanket over her shoulders. "Your home is quiet. Safe." Tom looked around the cabin, almost amused. "Most people say it's too quiet. For someone walking through a storm alone," she said. "Quiet is a blessing." Tom understood that. Loneliness felt heavy on some days, but safety, no matter how silent, was still something a person could hold on to. He made breakfast, simple warm oats and tea, and Ayanna joined him at the small wooden table. She ate politely, thanking him each time he placed something in front of her. Tom was not used to conversation, but she had a gentle way of speaking that didn't make him feel pressured or awkward. When they finished eating, the two of them sat near the fire, warming their hands. The wind outside continued its long cry. It felt like the world beyond the cabin had disappeared under snow. Ayanna finally spoke after a long, quiet moment. "I should tell you more about how I got separated." "Well," Tom nodded, giving her his full attention. "My group was crossing the ridge when the storm started. We knew winter was close, but the snow came earlier than we expected. I stayed behind to help a younger rider who had trouble guiding his horse through the wind. By the time I helped him forward, the others were already far ahead. The snow grew thicker, the light dimmer. Soon, I could not see the tracks or hear the voices of my people anymore." She paused, staring into the fire. Her voice never shook, but there was a softness in it, like someone remembering a moment sharper than they wished. "I walked for hours. The storm kept pulling at me. I called out, but the wind took every sound. At one point I wondered if I should stop and wait for morning, but I knew stopping meant freezing." Tom listened quietly, imagining her pushing forward through that long stretch of white emptiness. He respected her strength more with every word she said. "When I finally saw a small light far in the distance," she said, "I thought maybe I was seeing something that wasn't real. But I walked toward it anyway, and it brought me here." Tom nodded slowly. "I'm glad it did." Ayanna gave him a small smile, a warm one, gentle but full of meaning. "I am glad too." The storm kept them inside for most of the day. Ayanna helped him with small things around the cabin, insisting she contribute instead of simply waiting for the storm to pass. She folded blankets, cleaned the table, and organized some of the items scattered on the shelves. Tom had not realized how messy he had allowed things to become. Living alone had made him careless with how he kept his space, but Ayanna didn't criticize, she simply helped, moving with quiet purpose. When she approached the old horses with him in the barn, they both looked up with curiosity. Ayanna smiled and brushed their heads gently. "They are tired," she said softly. "But they trust you." Tom shrugged. "They're old, and they've seen me every day for years." "Animals always have a choice," she replied, stroking one horse's neck. "They stay calm only when they feel safe." Her words stayed in Tom's mind long after they walked back to the cabin. People were the same, he realized. They opened up only when they felt safe. And even though he hadn't said much, he could see that Ayanna wasn't afraid of him. That thought warmed him more than the fire. The afternoon passed quietly, with both of them sharing small stories. Tom talked about the time he tried to fix a fence post alone, slipped in the mud, and got stuck for half an hour trying to pull himself out. Ayanna laughed softly, not loudly, not in a way that filled the room, but enough to brighten it. She told him about her younger cousins, how they would follow her around asking questions about how to track animals or how to read the weather. The pride in her voice was clear. She spoke of them as someone who loved guiding and protecting others. Tom realized something else while listening. Ayanna was strong, confident, and patient. She was the kind of person who made difficult things easier simply by being present. As evening came, Tom went out to gather more wood. Ayanna followed him outside, though he told her She could stay in the warmth. "I want to help," she said, stepping into the snow with steady feet. Tom didn't argue again. They collected the logs together. Her hands were quick, her movements precise even in cold air. She stayed close enough that he could hear her breath, soft and controlled. When they entered the cabin again, the light from the fire cast warm colors across the walls. Ayanna set the wood down beside the hearth, brushing snow from her sleeves. Tom watched her for a moment, noticing the way she handled everything with quiet dignity. She did not act helpless or lost. Even in a stranger's home, she carried herself with calm strength. "How long do you think the storm will last?" she asked. Tom glanced at the window. "Could be tomorrow. Could be 2 more days. Hard to say with winter storms." She nodded, accepting the uncertainty. "Then we wait." They sat again near the fire. The warmth filled the room, and the crackling sound of burning logs made the space feel comfortable, almost peaceful. Ayanna wrapped the blanket around herself again and looked at Tom with thoughtful eyes. "You live alone here," she said softly, "for many years." Tom shifted a little, unsure how to answer. "Yes, it's quiet, but quiet isn't always bad." "No," she agreed gently, "but it can be heavy." He didn't deny it. Maybe because she understood. Maybe because she wasn't speaking in a way that judged him. Ayanna looked around the cabin once more. "You helped me when I knocked at your door," she said. "You didn't ask questions. You didn't doubt me. You only offered warmth." Tom looked at her, meeting her eyes. "Anyone would do that." "Not anyone," she said softly. The fire glowed between them, warming their faces as the storm continued outside. Tom didn't know what would happen when the storm finally ended, if she would leave right away, if her people were looking for her, or if this quiet moment was all they would share. All he knew was that her presence made the long, silent cabin feel alive again. And as night settled in, he realized something surprising. For the first time in 9 long years, he did not mind the storm at all, because its snow had brought someone into his lonely life, someone who spoke gently, worked with him, listened to him, and filled the empty room with a warmth deeper than fire. He never expected it, but he didn't want it to disappear too soon. The storm did not ease the next day. Instead, it thickened, wrapping the entire ranch in a heavy blanket of white. The world outside looked like a place where time had stopped. Snow reached the porch, the barn roof sagged under the weight, and the wind carved shapes in the drifts like silent sculptures. Inside, the fire burned warm and steady, while Tom and Ayanna shared the quiet space as if they had known each other longer than just 2 days. Tom had never imagined hosting someone for so long. Most days, he had trouble keeping his own thoughts in order, let alone sharing his space with another person. Yet, surprisingly, everything felt natural with Ayanna. She spoke softly, moved quietly, and never demanded anything. Her presence did not disturb his routines. It simply added warmth to them. That morning, she helped him sweep the snow from the inside of the barn door. Though cold wind rushed in every time the door opened, she did not complain. Her breath puffed into small white clouds, and her calm expression never changed. "You're working too hard," Tom finally said, as she lifted another shovel of snow. Ayanna gave him a small smile. "Working keeps the body warm, and it takes my mind off the storm." "Everyone? It's not Rendabelt." Tom watched her for a moment. She had strength, not only in her hands, but in her spirit. Many people would have panicked after being lost, but she held herself steady, as if she trusted the world to give her a way forward. When the barn was clear enough for the horses to move freely, they returned inside. The cabin felt even warmer after facing the biting wind. Ayanna hung her damp blanket near the fire so it could dry, and she sat down with a sigh of relief. Tom brought her a cup of warm tea. She thanked him and wrapped her hands around it, letting the heat soak into her fingers. For a while, They drank quietly, listening to the fire crackle. After a long moment, Ayana spoke. "You said yesterday you lived here since you were young." Tom nodded slowly, unsure where she was going with the conversation. "My family lived here before me. My parents built most of this ranch long ago. And after they passed," she said gently, "you stayed." "Yes," he replied. "Didn't see a reason to leave. Didn't see a reason to go anywhere else." Ayana tilted her head thoughtfully. "Sometimes, staying in one place keeps us safe. But sometimes, it keeps us lonely." Tom didn't answer right away. Her words sank into him more deeply than she might have realized. He stared at the fire, watching flames curl around the logs. "It wasn't easy at first," he said quietly. "But the quiet? I got used to it. Maybe too used to it." Ayana studied him with kind eyes. "You don't speak like someone who likes being alone." Tom almost laughed at that. "After 9 years, I don't know what I like anymore." Ayana's expression softened. She looked as though she wanted to say more, but she didn't push him. Instead, she shifted her seat closer to the fire and began showing him how she braided thin strips of leather together, a skill she learned from her elders. Her fingers moved smoothly, weaving the pieces into a strong, simple pattern. Tom watched in curiosity. "You learned that young?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "My grandmother taught me. She said hands should never be idle for too long." "Ip," she said. "My grandmother taught me." Tom smiled. "I think she'd get along with my mother." Ayana chuckled. "Mothers are the same everywhere." They sat together for a long time, sharing small stories that gave glimpses into their very different worlds. Ayana talked about her tribe, how they moved with the seasons, how the elders guided decisions, how the younger ones learned to track, ride, and survive. She spoke with respect and fondness, painting pictures of open plains, campfires, songs, and traditions. Tom, in turn, shared memories of the ranch when it was full of life. He talked about rounding up cattle with his father, watching sunsets from the hill, and his mother insisting he wash his boots before stepping inside. Ayana listened closely. Through these small conversations, the quiet distance between them shrank. Later in the afternoon, Tom took out a toolbox to fix a loose hinge on the front door. Ayana stood nearby, observing his careful hands. "You are patient," she said. "Not always," Tom replied, tightening a screw. "But living alone teaches you things. If something breaks, you fix it. If you don't fix it, it doesn't get fixed." Ayana nodded. "In my tribe, we say the same. A person must learn to care for the place they live, or the place will not care for them." Tom liked that saying. He liked listening to her voice, too firm yet thoughtful, never hurried. As the day went on, the storm began to quiet just slightly. The wind softened, the snow thinned, and the world seemed to settle into a slow, calm breath. But Tom knew that even if the storm eased, the snow on the ground was too deep for anyone to travel. When evening arrived, they shared a simple meal. Ayana offered to cook, and Tom let her, enjoying the unfamiliar yet comforting way she prepared things. She added herbs she found in her pack, giving the food a warm, rich aroma that filled the cabin. After they ate, Ayana wiped her hands on a cloth and looked at Tom thoughtfully. "You speak little," she said softly, "but you listen fully. Many people talk too much and hear too little." Tom wasn't sure how to respond. He wasn't used to compliments. He wasn't used to being understood, either. "I'm just not good with words," he said finally. "You speak enough," she said. "Enough to be kind." Her words settled heavily in his chest. Kind. It had been a long time since someone called him anything at all. Outside, the sky grew darker, the wind slowing until the world became strangely still. Ayana stood near the window, looking out at the moonlit snow. Do you think your people will come looking for you? Tom asked. Yes, she said softly. They will search. But not in the dark. They will wait until morning. Tom nodded, though he felt something tighten inside him. Morning meant the storm might be clear enough for her to leave. Morning meant his cabin might return to silence. Ayanna turned away from the window and sat closer to the fire again. Tom, she said gently, I want to thank you. Truly. You opened your door when I needed help. Not everyone would. I just did what anyone should, he replied. This storm could have been my end, she said quietly. But you gave me another chance. Tom swallowed, feeling a heaviness he didn't expect. I'm glad you're safe. For a while, they simply listened to the fire. The cabin's warmth felt deeper than before, not just from the flames but from the comfort of shared space. Ayanna finally leaned back, her eyes soft with tiredness. Tomorrow, she murmured. The storm might pass. Tom nodded slowly. Yes. It might. Tom. Tom nodded. Tom nodded. Tom nodded. Tom nodded. Tom nodded. Tom nodded. She looked at him with a gentle expression. Then tomorrow, we will see what the world decides. Tom didn't know what that meant exactly, but her voice held calm certainty. She was not rushing to leave, not running away from him. She was simply accepting whatever came next. The fire burned low, the storm settled, and the cabin held a quiet warmth neither of them had expected. And as Tom prepared to sleep, one thought stayed with him. He had lived alone for 9 years, but this gentle, strong woman had filled his quiet world with something he hadn't felt in a long time: connection, warmth, and the simple comfort of another human soul. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, he hoped the morning would come slowly. The storm finally weakened during the night, and by sunrise, the world outside looked strangely peaceful. The sky was clear, pale, blue, and the long fields of snow lay still like a white ocean without waves. Tom stepped outside early, pushing the door slowly so the cold air wouldn't burst in too fast. The snow was deep, almost knee-high in some places, and glittered under the morning light. The silence was so complete that even the sound of his breath felt loud. Ayanna walked out after him, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. Her boots sank into the snow with soft crunches. She looked around carefully, studying the empty plains and the untouched drifts. Her face was calm, but her eyes searched the horizon, as if looking for signs of her people. They will come, Tom said gently. Yes, she replied. If the storm truly passed, they will begin searching. Tom nodded. The quiet morning felt heavy for him, even though he knew she could not stay forever. He had hoped the storm would last just a little longer, just enough to keep her near his fire for one more day. They walked to the barn together. The horses lifted their heads when they entered, snorting softly. Ayanna stroked their necks, whispering something in her language that Tom didn't understand but found comforting to listen to. After giving the horses hay and checking their water, they returned to the cabin. Tom prepared breakfast. Ayanna helped, slicing vegetables while he heated the pot over the fire. Everything they did together felt natural, as if it had always been part of his life. That simple routine cooking, passing things back and forth, sharing warm food, made the cabin feel like it had woken up from a long sleep. When they finished eating, Ayanna stood near the window again. Her eyes sharpened suddenly. There, she said quietly. Tom followed her gaze. Far in the distance, 3 riders were moving slowly across the snow, dark shapes against the white fields. Even from the cabin window, he could sense their determination. They were searching carefully, moving in wide arcs, looking for any sign of their lost member. Ayanna stepped outside without hesitation, standing on the porch with her blanket wrapped around her shoulders like a long shawl. She raised her arm and waved once, slow and steady. The closest rider stopped. Then, in a moment Tom almost didn't believe, the rider turned sharply and began heading toward the cabin. The other two followed. Tom stayed near the door, watching as the riders approached. Their horses pushed through the snow with strong, patient steps. Ayanna didn't move until they reached the front of the ranch. The first rider, a tall man wearing a heavy coat of fur, dismounted quickly. His expression was full of relief when he saw Ayanna standing safely before him. "Ayanna," he called in a firm but emotional voice. She stepped forward, touching his arm lightly. "I am safe," she said calmly. "The storm separated us, but I found shelter." The man looked past her, his eyes landing on Tom. For a moment there was silence, a quiet pause as he studied the cowboy. Not with fear, just with careful curiosity. "This man gave you shelter?" he asked her. "Yes," Ayanna replied. "He opened his door when I had nowhere to go." The two other riders approached as well, forming a small group in front of the cabin. Their faces showed relief, but also tension. Tension that came from worry and responsibility, not hostility. Tom stepped forward a bit, giving them space but also showing respect. "She came here during the storm," he said simply. "She was cold, tired, and hungry. I just helped how I could." The tall man nodded slowly. "Your help is noted," he said. His voice was respectful, but the weight of leadership rested in it. "We have searched since the storm broke. We feared the worst." Ayanna placed a hand on his arm again. "I am here," she said softly. "Do not worry anymore." Tom watched the quiet exchange, feeling something inside him grow tight. He knew what would come next. Her people had found her. Soon, she would leave, and the cabin would return to the silence he had almost forgotten until she arrived. One of the younger riders noticed Ayanna's blanket and asked if she was harmed. She shook her head. "I was cared for," she said firmly. "Tom gave me warmth, food, and safety." The leader looked toward the cabin again, his gaze thoughtful. "You have shown kindness," he said. "For that, we are grateful." Tom nodded. "Just did what anyone should." Ayanna glanced at him then, her eyes lingering a moment longer than necessary. There was something unspoken there, something gentle and sad. The leader turned to Ayanna. "We should return," he said. Ayanna hesitated. It was a small hesitation, barely a second, but Tom saw it clearly. She looked back at the cabin, at the warm fire glowing through the window, at the footprints they had made in the snow together, at the porch she had swept, the barn they had cleared, the quiet life she had briefly shared. Tom didn't speak. He didn't want to pressure her. She deserved to choose freely. Ayanna turned back to her people. "I will return," she said. "But I want to speak with Tom first." The riders looked surprised but stepped aside. Ayanna walked toward Tom, her steps slow and thoughtful. "Tom," she said gently, "my people expect me to return with them. They need me. But I did not want to leave without telling you what this place meant to me." Tom swallowed, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm glad you're going back to people who care about you." Ayanna lowered her gaze for a moment. "You cared too, in your quiet way." She looked up again, her expression soft. "You live alone, but your heart is not empty. You gave me warmth when I needed it most." Tom wasn't sure what to say. His chest felt heavy, but he kept his voice steady. "You're welcome here. Anytime. Far, 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 far." Ayanna smiled, one of the warmest smiles she had given since arriving. "I know." She took a breath, as if deciding something important inside her. "For 2 days, your cabin felt like a place where the world stopped being harsh. I will remember that. I will remember that." Tom felt the words more deeply than he expected. "And I'll remember the company," he said quietly. It's been a long time since this place felt alive. Ayana looked at him as though she wanted to say more, but her riders were waiting. She stepped back slowly. "I must go now," she whispered. Tom nodded. He watched as she walked to the group, mounted one of the horses, and sat tall despite the weight of the moment. Before the riders turned to leave, Ayana looked back at Tom, one last time. Their eyes met across the white snow, across the quiet space that had grown between them in such a short time. And in that silent moment, Tom understood that something had changed for both of them. Then the riders turned and began their slow journey back across the plains. Tom stood on the porch long after they disappeared from sight, staring at the wide, white land that suddenly felt emptier than before. The wind was soft, the sky clear, but inside him the cabin had lost the warmth it gained during those 2 days. The silence returned, but it did not feel the same. Because now, silence had a memory shaped like a strong, calm woman named Ayana, who had found warmth at his door and then taken a piece of it with her. For the first time in many years, Tom felt something unusual the morning after Ayana left. It wasn't just loneliness. He knew loneliness well, had lived with it like a shadow. This was different. It was the feeling of someone missing from a place where they had brought light. His cabin, which had glowed with warmth for 2 days, seemed colder now even though the fire burned the same way. The air felt still, too still. He tried returning to his usual routine, but everything reminded him of her. The wooden bowl she had used was still drying on the shelf. The blanket she wrapped around herself was folded neatly near the fire. The corner of the cabin where she sat, braiding leather, seemed strangely empty. Even the barn felt different, almost as if the horses were waiting to see if she'd walk in again. Tom told himself to focus on work. He went out to break the ice on the water trough, gathered wood, checked the roof, and cleared the path from the cabin to the barn. Work usually helped quiet his thoughts, but today it didn't. Even while sweeping snow from the porch, he kept glancing at the road across the plains, knowing very well that she was far away by now. The day passed slowly. Snow still covered everything, but the wind was calm. The sky was a soft gray, the kind that made the world look peaceful but distant. By evening, Tom found himself sitting by the fire, staring at the flames, wondering why such a short time with her had changed him so deeply. He didn't expect anything more to happen. He assumed she would return to her people, continue her life, and forget this small cabin on a quiet ranch. He didn't blame her. He had nothing to offer except silence and an old home that hardly saw visitors. Still, he could not stop thinking about the way she smiled before leaving, the way she hesitated, the way she looked back at him as if part of her didn't want to go too quickly. By the second day, he tried harder to settle back into his old life. He rode out to check the fence lines buried under snow and fed the horses early. But no matter what he did, his thoughts returned to her. The world had felt alive when she was there, and now it felt like he was trying to catch warmth from a fire that was slowly fading. By the third day, something unexpected happened. Late in the afternoon, when the sun was lowering and painting the snow in soft orange tones, Tom heard the distant sound of hooves. At first, he thought it was just the wind playing tricks with the quiet land. But the rhythm of the sound grew clearer, steady, real. Someone was approaching. Tom stepped outside, wiping his hands on his coat. A single rider was coming toward the ranch. As the figure drew closer, Tom felt his breath shorten. It was Ayana. She rode slowly, guiding the horse carefully through the deep snow. When she reached the ranch, she dismounted with practiced ease and walked toward him, leaving light footprints behind. Tom felt frozen, unsure if he was imagining it. But she stopped in front of him with a warm, steady expression. "Tom," she said softly, her voice carrying warmth he had missed. "Ayana?" he whispered, almost afraid to believe it. "You came back?" She nodded once, her eyes holding his. "I told my people I needed time. Time to return. Time to decide. Time to follow what felt right. Tom didn't speak. His heart felt too full, too heavy with surprise and relief. Ayanna looked around the ranch, the porch, the barn, the windows glowing with firelight, and then back at him. "I did not come because I was lost this time," she said. "I came because this place gave me peace. And because you treated me with kindness when you had no reason to." Tom took a slow breath. "Your people? They're okay with you being here?" "Yes," she said. "They trust me. They know I choose carefully. And they saw the way I spoke about you." Her words warmed him more than the fire ever could. Ayanna stepped a little closer, her eyes soft. "Tom, I want to stay for a while. Not forever, not yet. But long enough to help you through the winter. Long enough to see if a quiet life here can become something more than loneliness." Tom felt something shift inside him, something gentle, something hopeful. He had grown so used to empty spaces and silent evenings that he had forgotten what it felt like to have someone share the air beside him. "You're welcome here," he said, his voice low but certain. "As long as you want to stay." She smiled, truly smiled this time. Not the small, polite ones she gave earlier. It was warm and peaceful, like the snow-covered world had opened a path just for her to return. They walked inside together. Ayanna placed her small travel bag near the door, the same spot where she had once collapsed in exhaustion. This time, she stood strong, choosing to be here, not forced by a storm. Tom prepared tea while she sat near the fire, warming her hands. When he handed her the cup, she looked up at him with gratitude, but also something deeper, something steady and sincere. For a long moment, they simply watched the fire together, letting the quiet settle around them like a soft blanket. Later, Ayanna spoke gently. "When the storm took me, I felt alone. When you opened your door, I felt safe. But when I returned to my people, I felt something missing." She turned to him with calm certainty. "It was this place. And you." Tom swallowed, emotion tightening his throat. "I didn't know if I'd ever see you again." "I knew," she said. "As soon as I left, I knew I would come back." The fire crackled softly. Outside, snow rested peacefully across the land, untouched by wind. The cabin no longer felt too quiet. It felt like it was breathing again. Ayanna stood and walked toward the small window, looking out into the snowy field. "Winter is long," she said quietly. "But perhaps winter is meant to be shared." Tom stepped beside her, feeling the warmth of her presence. "Maybe it is." "Ah." She turned to him, her expression gentle but full of certainty. That simple sentence settled inside him like a seed of hope, small but powerful. From that evening onward, the cabin was no longer a place of silence. Ayanna helped with chores, cooked beside him, cared for the horses, and brought stories from her world. Tom taught her how to fix fences, chop wood safely, and guide the horses through heavy snow. They laughed at small mistakes, talked through long nights, and sat near the fire when the cold became too strong. Slowly, steadily, the ranch began to feel alive again. Slowly, steadily, Tom began to feel alive again too. And every time he stepped outside and saw footprints beside his own in the snow, he felt grateful for the storm that had brought a stranger to his door, and even more grateful for the choice she made when she came back on her own. For the first time in 9 long years, Tom Harlan was no longer alone, and the warmth Ayanna had asked for on that first night had become something neither of them wanted to let go.